Welcome to The Edge. I'm joined by Representative Marcia Morey of North Carolina, who has introduced a bill to ban amateur and college player prop bets. Representative Morey is a former Olympic swimmer. She's from the Durham area, represents Durham, home of the Duke Blue Devils. That whole area has a lot of really highly esteemed universities, and in that they are also competing athletically. So Representative Morey is extremely familiar with what goes on with amateur and collegiate athletes. Representative Morey, when you introduced that legislation to ban college and amateur player prop bets, what was your thought process on why that legislation is needed?
Thanks. And Larry, it's great to be with you. I introduced it pretty much for the integrity of sports and worry about the pressure, harassment of athletes. I think you probably know, and your listeners, that during the March Madness, UNC forward Hernando Bacot at the press conference said after his performance, he got over 100 direct messages harassing him about not getting the rebounds people had betted on, and that it was very disturbing to him. I think it caused him some anguish. And I'd heard reports of that, throughout the country. The letter that Charlie Baker with the NCAA wrote many sports athletic directors about and legislators, his concern about it, that about 30% of college athletes playing at a high level performance had some kind of communication harassment about their own performance. So that's why I introduced this bill. It's not to ban sports betting, mobile sports betting, which we just passed in North Carolina. It's really to protect the athlete and ensure the integrity of the sport. Don't bet on an individual's player performance. Bet on the game, bet on other aspects, but let's take that added pressure off the athlete.
Yeah, you mentioned the NCAA president. I think it, as you put it, a couple of his concerns. One is harassment of players by bettors who are upset over under on how many rebounds a player gets or whatever. If they don't hit those marks, the bettors will get upset and harass the players, is one of the president's concerns. Another one, of course, is the integrity of competition. As a competitor yourself, and bettors need to know that the integrity is intact in a competitive event. So there are those, though, Representative, who say a couple things, and I think Representative Sain is one in you guys' legislature, that, look, if players are being harassed, let's let the universities and law enforcement authorities dig into this, who's harassing them, and let them sort of hold those people accountable. And another argument, Representative, I know you've heard this, is if you guys have a regulatory body there, as do all states where it's legal, that oversees any kind of irregularity, any kind of problem with the industry. There are those who would argue if you take player prop bets off the regulated menu of bets that a bettor can place a wager on, that bettor will go overseas, go offshore to unregulated sites where, who knows, there is no accountability. You can't track. There are organizations like U.S. Integrity in Nevada that will track irregularities in betting, and they can pull down the bets if there are irregularities. So those two arguments, why doesn't law enforcement sort of deal with those harassment issues, one, and two, what's the argument, what's the counter to bettors will just take those bets overseas where they're not monitored, not regulated?
Right. And those are valid arguments. And I would say just from the starting line, if we disallow prop bets, the problem is less likely to occur. That we're opening up that these individual performances can be bet on. Bettors can make money off an athlete. So, as I said, I think that opens the door to a lot of, disturbing issues for the athletes. Yes, they can go offshore, the bettors, as they have before we even legalized mobile sports betting in North Carolina. That happens. I think if the harassment occurs, that could be tracked and verified, that it would be less likely for someone betting offshore illegally to then go ahead and publicly harass an athlete. So I think there is some safeguard there. They don't want to uncover their illegal activity offshore. So it is just, I think, a common sense. Most prop betting occurs, from what I understand, during March Madness. I think Ohio is considering a law or has passed a law to disallow prop betting during March Madness, during the college athletic basketball. I've heard the bottom line for a lot of the sports booking companies is only 0.7 to 2.5% of their bottom line on prop bets. So I don't think it would hurt their bottom line that much if we disallowed prop betting. And I think you mentioned, should law enforcement go after the harassers? Yes, and that may be another avenue to try to stop it, that there could be anti-harassment measures put in place. And finally, you mentioned in North Carolina, our state lottery commission is the one that's controlling the rules, regulations over the mobile sports betting. The rulemaking, they could possibly ban prop betting by their rulemaking instead of by statute. We just thought, several legislatures and I thought it would be a better road to go, just do it outright by statute, and then everyone knows the rules of the game.
And mentioning that, Representative, if what is the status of the legislation? I noticed online that it hasn't been heard yet, and there has been pushback from some lawmakers who have been were involved in the process to get mobile on in the first place. What's the status of the bill, and do you anticipate that it will pass? And if not, will you come back and you mentioned will you come back and reintroduce it, or will you seek some sort of effort through the Lottery Commission? Some states have just gone right to the Gaming Control Board. What's the status of the bill right now, and will it pass?
The status is we filed it, and that's probably as far as it will go. So if you put a bet on where my bill's going, bet nowhere. I'm in a super minority. Representative Sain, who I respect, he is one of the leaders of the super majority, and so they can stop our bills, and I doubt it will get a committee hearing. I think the issue is important. It's important to athletic directors, to coaches, to the athletes. So even the conversation, I think it's very worthwhile to have and draw attention to it and try and stop it.
Will you and some of the other lawmakers who want to ban amateur and college player prop bets, will you guys seek an effort through the Lottery Commission, through state regulators, or if it dies in the legislature, is that it? You just want to raise the issue, or will you keep trying to get those bets banned another way?
I think we're going to keep on with this effort, whatever avenue it takes. I think the Lottery Commission, I know President Baker of the NCAA did send a letter to our Lottery Commission to ask them to look at the rulemaking avenue on this. So that's a potential. We may reintroduce this bill, may make some changes to it next session if it doesn't go anywhere. We want to stop any potential harassment. We want to keep student athletes, healthy, keep them clean themselves. They can even possibly, their roommates bet on their own performance, knowing how they're doing, kind of inside information. My first job out of law school, I was the first female investigator with the NCAA. And, this was before betting was even legal. But I saw pressure on athletes after alums would give them illegal gifts. And the, turn in favor for those illegal gifts was their performance on the court, on the field. And I saw the detrimental effects on that. So now it's just compounded with where we are, especially with our mobile betting on phones.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to talk to the governor or the head of the Lottery Commission or other state regulators about it, or is it just in the formative stages right now legislatively?
It's in the formative stages. Our governor did sign the bill, so he's a big Hurricanes fan. I don't know if he himself places any bets, and I respect his position on it. I just think, some of us have a different take, and as we're watching, it just came into effect, and you see unintended consequences. I think the prop bet was one of them.
Appreciate you doing this with me, Representative Morey. Before I let you jump, what's your view overall on how March 11 you guys launched mobile right before the ACA for the conference tournament, right before the NC2A tournament, basketball, and of course North Carolina, a huge sports states period. But when it comes to basketball, it's serious. And then going forward now into football season coming up, what's your take on how mobile has been to date? And do you anticipate when retail may launch, in-person, commercial?
Yeah. I think if you look at the revenue that came in as soon as we launched it, it's probably exceeded expectations. And I've also heard stories from college students that they know their roommate, they know their friends put way too much money in, and it's buyer's regret right now. So those are anecdotal stories, how it affects, young college students when they pull out their phone and they just kind of get hooked to making continuous bets. I think that's going to be an issue. We know gambling is an issue. So, I'm concerned about raising revenue for state government off gambling resources. We keep lowering taxes, eliminating corporate taxes, and we say, oh, we're going to supplement it with gambling revenues and taxes. I just think that's a bad fiscal policy.
I appreciate you shedding light on the issue, Representative Morey. Thanks so much for doing this interview.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
I'm Larry Henry from Gambling.com. Thank you for joining us on The Edge.